Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program Spiritism Inspiring Lives. Today, our reflections will be based on the theme Imperfect and Good Mediums. And our reflections are based within Spiritism. So, for those who perhaps may not be familiar with, or even for us to remind ourselves about, we start with some reflections about Spiritism that helps us to dip into the understanding more, and also at the same time, leaving the references from where we are coming from, in case someone may be interested to get the books and also study deeper, because here we just have a limited time and our reflections are still limited based on everything but Spiritism has to offer to us. So in that way, we start by the book, What is Spiritism? In the prologue. So I quote, Spiritism is simultaneously a science of observation and a philosophical doctrine. As a practical science, it consists in the relations that can be established with the spirits. As a philosophy, it entails all the moral consequences that result from such relations. Bear in mind here relations that can be established with the spirits, and also consequences that result from such relations. Later on, it will make much more sense than is now, but just bear in mind that. And we carry on in the same book. I quote, Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relation with the corporeal world. It embraces the scientific, philosophical, and moral aspect of ourselves. When we say religion, also it is helping us to understand our moral, ethical values, which are based on the development of our emotional intelligence. As we continue to reflect in the same book, What is Spiritism? Chapter 1, I quote, Spiritism touches on all branches of philosophy, metaphysics, psychology, and morality. And we could even add further as we dip into study Spiritism. It also touches on education and different branches in our development where we are learning, evolving, and progressing. So Spiritism is not something apart from our life experience where we are as learners in the universe. It helps us to broaden our understanding. And it's still within the same reference, What is Spiritism? Chapter 1, I quote, from the philosophical point of view, Spiritism responds to people's aspirations concerning the future because it is a positive and rational, and that is why it is suitable for the positivist character of this center. So here again, from a philosophical perspective, for those who may be interested to get more into the philosophical aspect of Spiritism, we suggest to read, to study the Spirit's book, which really brings and approaches the philosophical aspect, which is a book of questions and answers. And it refers to different areas in our existences, helping us to enlighten us according to the universal code of evolution, of progress. And here we are carrying on within now, moving to the Medium's book. The Medium's book reflects the scientific aspect of Spiritism. So for those who are like this aspect, we suggest the Medium's book by Allan Kardec, which is available free of charge through the internet. And we refer to the part 1, chapter 3, regarding methodology. And I quote, Spiritism applies to all the issues that interest humankind. It's very broad, so it helps all of us. It applies to all issues that concern humanity, that helps us to give answers to our questions that we will raise naturally and in a healthy way as we learn to question more about our own individuality, our own experiences, our own existences, and so on and so forth. Going back to the book, What is Spiritism? Chapter 1, we learn about, as I quote, Spiritism does not impose itself because it respects freedom of conscience. Moreover, it understands that any imposed belief is superficial and gives only the appearances of faith, but it is not real faith. It lays out its principle in front of everyone so that all may form an opinion with the full knowledge of the facts. I personally enjoy pretty much this part, and it's very powerful when we are in the 21st century, invited at least through Spiritism to learn to think for ourselves, to learn to develop our own reasoning. And here we are clearly invited by Allan Kardec, in this statement that Spiritism doesn't impose anything. Spiritism is the teaching of the superior enlightened spirits, bringing the message of Jesus, bringing the message of God to humanity. So it is available to everyone, and every spirit, a spirit, is free to choose when we want to learn about, when we want to reflect about, because in essence, my friends, the truth that Spiritism is presented, surely in evolution, because we are still more on the beginning than on plenitude, brings the guidance which we have within ourselves already, since we have been created simple and ignorant by God, with love, in order to learn to love ourselves and love others. So what the study does, what the reflections do, is merely helping us to dip within ourselves, where all of us bring innate an aspect of wisdom given by God, which now we, who are responsible for our evolution, are invited to develop our own thinking, and in that way making wiser choices as we carry on. And then we go back still in the book, What is Spiritism? Now, chapter 2, item 10, and learn, as I quote, in the human being, there are three essential components. First, the soul or spirit, which is the intelligent principle that harbors the thought, will, and moral sense. Second, the body. We mention here the physical body, which is the material envelope that enables the spirit to relate to the exterior world. And the third, the perispirit, which is the fluid, light, imponderable envelope that serves as the connection and intermediary between the spirit and the body. All of us, myself and every one of you, while we are incarnated, we are these three-dimensional beings. Essentially spirit, we express ourselves through the physical body, but we are not the physical body, and we have a perispirit, which is the astral body or the spiritual body, which we continue existing even after our physical death. Having said that, then we start now. Bear in mind our theme, Imperfect and Good Mediums. We start with a reference with the greatest mediums that we had on earth, which already is disincarnated and back to the spiritual world, Francisco Cândido Xavier, or Chico Xavier. It was asked by him, what is mediumship in the real meaning of its essence? And he teaches us by saying, and I quote, mediumship in essence is affinity, establishing the possibility of a spiritual exchange between creatures that identify themselves on the same track of emotion and thought. Here we are now, really going deeper into our theme today. The first question would be, do we know what we think? Do we know what we feel? Because that is important. Through these dimensions, we are communicating with other beings in the universe, not only with beings who are in the flesh as we are, but with other spirits. Could be those who are in the flesh, those who are without a physical body. Fundamental mediumship in essence, because when we talk about mediums, we talk also about mediumship. And mediumship in essence is neutral, but through the affinity, we can connect, we can tune into, we can have affinity with imperfect spirits or good spirits. So in that way, we start with the Medium's book, chapter 16, item 195, learning, as I quote, according to the medium's moral qualities. It's fundamental for us to observe that dimension within ourselves. We only mention Allan Kardec teaching us these mediums in passing at this point in order to complete the table. The table is different groups as we will go through learning in terms of facilitating or methodology of learning, since we shall address them in the following special chapters. The moral influence of mediums. There are different chapters in the mediums book, which we highly recommend to also learn and study, because they help us to understand, firstly, ourselves, and secondly, the energies or the influences that we may be under. The other chapter, obsession, where we learn about simple obsession, fascination, and subjugation, always deteriorating further in case we don't learn how to look after ourselves, how to heal ourselves. The other chapter that is fundamental to understand and read and reflect about in the mediums book, when we talk about mediums, is the identity of spirits. In order to understand my own identity, in order to understand the identity of other spirits that are surrounded us, and others for which we ask particular attention. We will observe the influence that the qualities and shortcomings of mediums can exert on the reliability of the communications, and which mediums can rightly consider themselves to be imperfect or good mediums. Because in the mediums book, because the mediums book, dear friends, is the greatest proposal of developing our psychic, is understanding that in general, we are all mediums, natural or ostensive mediums. So when we read here, as Allan Kardec says, we will observe the influence of the qualities, good mediums, on the shortcomings, imperfections. He is referring to ourselves as spirits. Who are the mediums? Spirits who are also learning. So it's fundamental the self-knowledge, the self-awareness that we conquer gradually in developing ourselves, in studying more and becoming aware of how we function psychically, what is suitable to us in order to promote inner health, promote well-being, be mediums of goodness, mediums as instruments that promote goodness within and around us and helping us. So having said that, we start now reflecting about imperfect mediums. When we study in the mediums book, we will find out in these different groups that Allan Kardec present us in order to help us to understand, but they are not the definite groups, there are much more. But for us to start with, we will realize that under the imperfect mediums, there are a lot of groups helping us to understand the different imperfections that we may be still carrying within ourselves. And that is very positive, because we cannot change, but we are not aware of. So bear in mind that we are all mediums, and imperfect mediums mean our own shadows, our own shortcomings, our own imperfections. So once we are becoming aware, we can change that. We all are valuable human beings, but we still are all imperfect, perfecting ourselves. So there's nothing wrong to become aware of our shortcomings. But it's wrong when we have the shortcomings, when we are full of imperfections and we are blind about them. That is complicated when we do about spirits. So when we start here in the mediums book, chapter 16, item 196, under imperfect mediums, the first group that Allan Kardec presents is obsessed mediums. In each group, we can ask ourselves, is that related to myself? Can I see myself under this group or certain aspects? And if so, then we work towards freeing ourselves from. When he says, I quote, obsessed mediums, those who cannot free themselves of annoying and deceptive spirits, but who are nonetheless not fooled by them. So very attentive here of the obsessive thinking, of the recurrent negative ideas that we may be holding. Is fundamental to pay attention to that, because these deceptive spirits usually are spirits who are lazy, who don't have much to do in their lives, and they follow us through our own thoughts. So fixated ideas, rigid ideas, obsessed ideas, attentive. Learn to stop them. We all can learn to develop mental discipline. We all have the power within, even if it looks like, it feels like that we don't, but we have to stimulate it in order to strengthen our willpower to re-educate ourselves. The next group under imperfect mediums is fascinated mediums. I quote, those who are fooled by deceptive spirits and delude themselves about the nature of the communications they received. Fascinated or fascination comes under the second dimension of obsession, which is important for us to understand, to read, to understand, and study. Why? For what purpose? For us to realize that fascination only happens through our pride. Because we are full of pride, we cannot see what is happening within ourselves in terms of our tendencies, in terms of our values. And those spirits, they are more aware of our own shadows, which sometimes we may not be conscious of. And they stimulate it with our permission, therefore with our unconsciousness. So it's fundamental to observe so that we increase our self-awareness, that we are attentive. Not only mediums who work in the spiritist centers or in the spiritual societies, in the mediumship work, not only that. Communication, we are all communicating on a daily basis. The question is, which way I'm communicating myself? So again, when we are fascinated, usually we are driven by pride, by selfishness, by excessive vanity, and quite often in a wrong way through our own illusions, which is not good for us. And another group of imperfect mediums is the subjugated mediums. I quote, those who are morally and often physically dominated by evil spirits. Someone may ask, Evanise, do evil spirits exist? Yes, because spirits are beings in evolution. They have been all as us, created simple and ignorant, and some of us, through free choice, we still are much more imperfect than perfect. We prefer to be driven by our own ego, which is rooted in pride and selfishness, the unhealthy ego, let's put it like that. And in that way, we could, as we deteriorate in the negativity, through our pride and selfishness, through vanity, through lack of forgiveness, that we present ourselves as we are not in essence. We enter into the defense mechanism, and in that way, we could be subjugated, as it says here, morally, which is through our emotions, through our thoughts. This is why it's so important to observe what we are thinking and become conscious of, and also even physically. Some people, they are subjugated physically because our willpower has been dominated gradually by those evil spirits. But it is through our own permission. Never another spirit can dominate us without us allowing it. So it's very important, the reflections here, which aim to empower ourselves. And what is different from fascination to subjugated? In the fascinated mediums, they are not conscious what they are doing, because the ill spirits, they blind the medium through pride, that they cannot see what they are saying or how they are interacting in their communications. While the subjugated ones, they are conscious on the influence of the external spirits, but they don't have the power internally to free themselves from this. All of this is temporary. As we are all evolving, surely sooner or later we will free ourselves from. Now, another group of imperfect mediums, remember, imperfect mediums means our imperfections, where we on the psychological, emotional level, which we are reflecting here. And we all have them in some degree and another. And here the other aspect is frivolous mediums, I'll quote, those who do not take their faculties seriously, but use it only as entertainment or for useless purposes. So again, when we are dealing with our own imperfections as frivolity, we don't care about the consequence, we don't have knowledge about, it's easier for us as ostensive mediums. It sounds like we walk around like an aerial and we are picking up the affinity with other minds. So it's important to observe that if you don't take it seriously in terms of disciplining our thoughts, disciplining our emotions, be attentive what we think, be attentive what we say, because everything in the universe, either thoughts, emotions, and words, is communicating with other beings through the affinity of the same length of thoughts, same emotions. We always, in every moment, can change that in case we want to. And then if we move on to the next one, is still in the imperfect. We are in the item in different mediums, and I quote, these take no moral advantage of the instructions they receive, nor do they change anything about their conduct and habits. Here, imperfect is important to reflect. Do I still have some elements of indifference in different mediums? The psychological and emotional aspect that we are looking here is indifference. If I'm dealing with indifference, it also means that I'm dealing with pride, with selfishness. Usually these different imperfections, shadows, or shortcomings, whatever the words we may use, they sometimes can be hidden within us. So we need to observe if they are part of our conduct or habits, because if they are, and we are not aware, we are not taking care of in re-educating ourselves, those conducts, those habits of indifference, which is really the shutdown on the emotional level, fed by negative, limited belief systems, will be the bridge that we connect through affinity with other spirits who are also in the same length of thought and feeling. And sometimes, if we are not aware, we can be guided by them, which surely is not what we want. Because our reflections is here is to empower ourselves. As we move on then to the next one, the proud mediums still is a group under the imperfect mediums. And I quote, those who flatter themselves because of the communications they receive. They think they have nothing more to learn about Spiritism or do not take to the heart the lessons they frequently receive from spirits. They are not content with the faculties they currently possess. They want all of them. Here we learn in the mediums book about mediums working in the practical mediumship in spiritist societies, in a spiritist center. But our reflections here, they go beyond that, because the mediums book is not only for mediums who work in spiritist societies. The mediums book is a guide that helps all the mediums, conscious or not, in any pathway that we are in our evolution, to study, to learn about. When we talk about proud mediums, we are referring to our own pride. And in the Spirits book, we also are reminded by the Enlightened Spirits that we still all carry some level of pride. Once more, others less. So it's important when we are workers within the spiritual societies that we are not thinking or feeling that what comes through us necessary is from a good spirit, or necessary everything what comes needs to come through us. Humbleness and charity helps us a lot to develop the elements of the higher self, where we will get better in terms of our qualities, moral qualities, ethical qualities, through conquering our maturity spiritually, psychically. In that way, we are instruments of goodness, but not necessarily the feeling as a pride-minded person that we are special because we are mediums. We are all special beings in the universe, merely because we have been created by God with love in order to learn to love ourselves and also learn to love others. All these imperfections, my dear friends, which the group of different mediums here through imperfect mediums refers to, we go back again saying it addresses our own limitations. And our own imperfections, our own limitations, our own shadows are the connection points that we attract ill-minded spirits in the same level. But if we are conscious of our imperfections, and honestly and sincerely are working in overcoming them, the efforts that we put into it on a daily basis, we are already getting out of those familiar same level of spirits through the efforts that we put into our self-education process. It's worthwhile doing that because we become independent of our own imperfections on our unconscious level. Because our life is supposed to be lived through the conscious mind, through the conscious level, where we increase self-awareness, we become aware in a loving way of our, let's say, pride, selfishness, vanity, rebelliousness, hate, anger, and whatever the shadows are. And in a loving way, we acknowledge them, but we put effort into not to validate them anymore. This is part of acquiring the inner autonomy, which we are all invited to. Is still under the imperfect mediums in another group, presumptuous mediums, and I quote, those who claim that they are in touch only with highly evolved spirits. They deem themselves infallible and regard whatever does not come from them as inferior and erroneous. That again, presumptuous is down to pride as well. We consider ourselves perfect much more than we are. And that is a mistake. Quite often we fall into the traps of the ill-minded spirits, either incarnate or those who are out of the flesh, those which we may in general don't see because they are without a physical body. But they see us. They are in advantage. Even they are without a physical body, they, through the perispirit, as we mentioned previously, they see us, they know our thoughts, they know our feelings. So it's very important to learn to be humble. Humble is part of self-love. Self-love is down to self-respect, where we can embrace our own nature, where we can embrace our own history, where we can embrace, acknowledge our own weak points, but understand that we are not weak. We are strong spirits in evolution, but we have weak aspects of our minds. So willing to be acknowledging it is taking responsibility for our own identity. At the same time, responsibility meaning autonomy, we are also empowering ourselves when we are in control of our imperfections and not controlled by. When we are controlled by, we are in a weak position. Now, another aspect is still imperfect mediums are the susceptible mediums. Within the learnings of the mediums book, and I quote, a variety of proud mediums who take offense at the criticism leveled at their communications. They are hurt by the least remark against them. When they display what they have received, it is meant to elicit admiration rather than an opinion. They usually have an aversion for persons who do not lavish praise upon them and avoid meetings in which they cannot impose themselves and dominate. There is another aspect to look within our imperfections or shortcomings. When we are very susceptible, meaning that we're very prideful, we don't admit feedbacks because we are lacking humbleness, we are lacking resignation, we are lacking inner moral ethical strength. We cannot tolerate that someone gives us a feedback because internally it is received from the position where we are as criticism. Bear in mind, mediums, feedback is not criticism. We as mediums are invited also to give us feedback constantly through self-evaluating ourselves. And if other people give us feedback, they are not doing that to criticize us. They are there to help us to open our eyes, to see what we cannot see. And because they know the danger that sometimes through affinity, we can be connected with other spirits, ill-minded spirits. And sometimes even when we are more disturbed in the fascination process to pride, which really what prevails in this process is our pride and selfishness. Sometimes we may think that we are connected with our spiritual guide. In reality, we are guided by an obsessor. So here we are reflecting in certain elements and aspects to help to develop our own psychic from a transpersonal holistic perspective, departing from the idea that we are all essentially spirits who are in evolution and are able and capable to connect with each other here on earth and beyond earth. As we carry on then, is still within the successible mediums. In the same chapter 16 and item 196, the spirit Erastus carries on telling to us by saying, let them, the imperfect mediums, the susceptible mediums, let them struck about elsewhere and seek a more complacent audience, or that they isolate themselves. Meetings without their presence lose nothing. What is the benefactor Erastus telling us? Well, dear mediums, myself and all of us who are here and later on may be studying that, it's important to understand that we are all very important as mediums, but not to disturb the work that is not ours. It's not to tell others what we should do without studying. It is important that we bring ourselves back to the center, where humbleness, which is the inner wisdom, guides our thoughts, guide our emotions, guide our actions, where we can cooperate with each other wherever we are. That is not only in spiritual societies, that also refers to families, to relationships, to workplaces. So in order for us to establish deeper connections with ourselves, it's fundamental to learn to control us, to have dominance over us, not over other people, to restructure our shortcomings as we carry on. Imperfect mediums for hire is in another group, and I quote, those who exploit their faculties. It's very dangerous when we are mediums, ostensive mediums here now, and we are exploiting our faculties. Because a lot of people, with all my respect, they are ignorant about mediumship, about spirituality. They think, oh my God, it's such a wonderful thing, spirits, yeah. But here we learn, dear friends, we are all spirits. Once we study, we get out of this fantastic, marvelous way of thinking or relating about spirits. We are all spirits. So be attentive, not exploiting our faculties, because otherwise we will be connected with ill spirits. Now, another group of imperfect mediums are ambitious mediums, and I quote, those who, even though they do not actually sell their abilities, nonetheless hope to get something from them. Ambitious is another shortcoming that we need to observe within ourselves. Because again, that shortcoming is based on pride, selfishness, vanity. We want to take advantage. So even if people may not pay for my faculties, I may directly or indirectly be charging for. For example, charging attention, manipulating people. I may do something and ask something else backwards. That is definitely what we don't want to do, because we are, as immortal beings, as mediums and evolution, we are here in order to learn to be givers in the world, to give freely what we freely received. I'm aware that that requires study, self-reflection, and efforts. But this is exactly what we are doing here, at least having the aim to facilitate some reflections for all of us. Now, another group of imperfect mediums is bad faith mediums. I quote, those who, despite having real abilities, pretend to have others in order to appear more important. However, we cannot label as mediums those persons who, having no mediumistic faculty whatsoever, only produce false phenomena through charlatanism. It's important to study mediumship and mediums as thinking beings, as we all are. Because if I don't develop my rational faith, knowing that we are all spirits, knowing more about mediumship, understanding myself better, there may be some mediums or some peoples, because mediums are people, mediums are spirits, they may not have ostensive mediumship, but because they are dishonest within themselves, when they bring the shortcoming of manipulation, they can easily manipulate people who are ignorant about this subject. So let's hope that it's not us. And as more as being light or consciousness through studying and understanding the natural faculties of mediumship, and also embracing our own shortcomings, understanding better, then we, from these groups of imperfect mediums, we promote ourselves towards the next group, which we will be studying later on. Another group of imperfect mediums, selfish mediums, and I quote, those who only employ their abilities for their own use and keep the communications they receive to themselves. Selfishness. So the shortcoming, the imperfections that we will be observing within our individuality is selfishness. How does selfishness express in my daily existences? First, I need to become aware, I need to become conscious. So then afterwards that I can choose to educate that shortcoming. Because surely selfishness and pride always works together. And that is a red flag in terms of being a medium. Because usually that blinds us in seeing our shortcomings, and also we think that we are the best one. But in reality, when we work instead of selfishness and pride, humbleness and charity in a global context, developing goodness within, we will be mediums, instruments, allowing the spirits to communicate through us in a balanced way, but not with a reference that we are the best ones. Other mediums may be better than we and may receive better communications than us. And as we are all learning, there is nothing wrong with that, because all of us have beings who are more evolved than us. They have more knowledge, they have more wisdom, and others less. So we are interacting with each other to learn from each other. We can even learn through the imperfections of others, observing our own imperfections and changing them without going through certain experiences. Other imperfect mediums are jealous mediums. I quote, those who regard with spite those mediums who are more appreciated and more highly developed. All these bad qualities necessarily have their counterpart in good mediums. So here again, when we are reflecting about the group of imperfect mediums, jealous mediums, the reflection here is not looking about other mediums. Do I have the tendency of being jealous in my relationships on a daily basis? It's nothing fantastic in my way of being, in my existence. Do I carry the tendency of being jealous, that I find it difficult to appreciate when someone is better than I am in certain aspects? Because we all have aspects that we are good at, and other people are better than us. I'm at ease within myself when I'm with someone who is more knowledgeable than I am, and can I be receptive and open to learn from? That is how we would be promoting us. But it's interesting to see here with Allan Kardec when he says by the end, all these bad qualities necessarily have their counterpart in good mediums. So up to now, as I started our reflection today by saying under the imperfect mediums, the group or the groups are huge, are a lot of them. That is merely showing us as essentially good beings that we all are, but in this stage of our evolution, our imperfections are dominating than our perfection aspect, our qualities. Our shortcomings are wider, are more ostensive in our existences than our good qualities. And studying about them is helping us to restructure those elements, those behaviors, those attitudes. Always bear in mind when we look within the imperfect mediums, meaning the imperfections that us as the spirit are bringing within us, it is an invitation for us to constantly be working on our evolution, on our progress, transcending our own shortcomings, never to be critical, self-critic, never to blame us, neither to blame others. It is all about learning. So now let's look within then the counterpart, the good mediums that we are looking here. Now then, starting to reflect about good mediums. And again, when we read about good mediums and study, bear in mind that the groups, according to the mediums book, they are fewer than the imperfect mediums. And the same as imperfect mediums, with good mediums, we are invited to observe our psychological and emotional tendencies, because we are not the body, we are spirits. And we are essentially psychological and emotional beings, which are psychological and emotional tendencies, consciously or not, they will manifest through our mediumship. This is why it's so important to reflect about. The first group in the chapter 16, item 197, good mediums, where we are referring now, we start with the serious mediums, and I quote, those who only use their abilities for the good and for truly useful purposes. They regard it as a profanation to put them at the service of curious and indifferent persons or for useless purposes. So it is important here, serious mediums. That does not mean that we cannot laugh, that we cannot smile, that we cannot have fun. No, it's not that. Those who only use their abilities for the good and for truly useful purposes. And when we say here good, serious mediums, under the good mediums, are people, are spirits who are evolving, maturing, growing, psychologically and emotionally. They spiritualizing themselves and understand the purpose of reincarnation, which is their own evolution. And we only can evolve through becoming better beings, in developing our intellectual intelligence, in understanding the universal laws, and also developing our emotional intelligence through our behavior, learning to be more charitable, to be more fraternal, to be good elements in the society where we are, good for ourselves and good for others. So when we are referred here, they only use their mediumship in terms to promote goodness, is the goodness for everyone, not in a selfish way. Wherever we are open to help. We are open to facilitate the progress. We are open to help to heal each other. So that is fundamental. We all bring good elements within, but I guess the seriousness, which is the opposite of the frivolity, frivolous mediums, as we saw previously, when we develop serious mediums or serious mediumship, we are actually protecting ourselves from external spirits who are ill-minded, who may be willing to hurt ourselves, interfering in our thoughts in a negative way, sometimes willing to guide us into the depression, but we drag us out. We have the willpower. We use our mediumship. We use our psychic elements in a constructive way. And if we don't have that yet developed, we can always, every day exercise and train and practice, because we are here on this school earth exactly to develop our psychic or superior psychic faculties, all of us. And another group within the good mediums is modest mediums. And I quote, those who attribute no merit to themselves for the communications they receive, no matter how good they may be. They feel foreign to the communications and do not imagine themselves to be beyond deception. Instead of running from impartial feedback, they ask for it. Modesty is a great faculty, is a great aspect of our maturity, is a great strength that we bring within. It is not weakness, it is a strength. Learn to be humble. We can only be modest if we learn to be humble. So we don't want to be who we are not. but we are in this, let's say, more balanced state of mind, which we promote ourselves, where we develop and grow spiritually, grow psychologically, emotionally. Therefore, we are open to receive feedback. And as we learn in the Medium's book, not only open, but we also ask for, especially when we are beginners, especially when we may be confused within our own way of being, merely because we are choosing to heal ourselves. We are choosing to learn about ourselves. We are choosing and willingly to invest in our mediumship. We are investing in us as beings in evolutions, because mediums are spirits as every one of us, beings in evolution. They are not special beings because they are ostensive mediums. Well, on the contrary, sometimes we learn ostensive mediums. We have great jobs still to do in terms of conquering our own higher self, in terms of promoting the real values in order to become good mediums. For instance, here, modesty. I repeat myself again. Be modest is not being weak. It means inner strength, inner competences. And then we still within the group of good mediums, we have the devoted mediums. And I quote as it says in the Medium's book: those who understand that true mediums have a mission to fulfill, and that, when necessary, they must sacrifice their likes, habits, pleasures, time, and even their material interests for the good of others. Maria Mendonça, good afternoon. Welcome to our study today. It's very important here, devoted mediums. When we bring the reflections back to us, would we consider ourselves be a devoted medium? Because the qualities that are expressed here help us to analyze ourselves. Because as mediums as we are, natural or ostensive, we have the duty to learn to analyze ourselves. And sometimes to be critical, not critical, developing the rational thinking that helps us not to allow our illusions to dominate. Devoted mediums who understand the full mission. We have a mission to promote ourselves, to heal ourselves, to help ourselves, to promote others. This is the mission that God has granted to all of us mediums. It's not to go through the futilities of life. As it says here, must sacrifice their likes. Then we may ask ourselves, which kind of likes that I'm invited as a being in evolution to sacrifice? Sacrifice means to act with the power of the enlightened heart, meaning letting go. My likes that I need to let go in order to evolve, to potentialize myself more as an immortal being. Because I'm not a body, I'm not from Earth, I will sooner or later leave Earth, carrying on through my perispirit, as mentioned in the beginning of our reflections, and I'm responsible for my destiny. They must sacrifice their habits. Which kind of habits? As a mortal being, a medium, I am invited to sacrifice in order to develop the group or allow myself to be part of the devoted mediums. Which kind of habits? Perhaps you may think about, I am lazy. Do I have the tendency to procrastinate? Do I have the tendency to lie? Do I have the tendency, the habit to gossip, slander around people? Just to give some suggestions for us to reflect about. Sacrifice my pleasures. Which kind of pleasures I'm seeking for? From which dimension of myself I'm seeking my pleasures? Is it from the ego state of mind? Is it from the self-love? Is it from the inner child, my immaturity, my infancy? Or is it from the self-level onwards? Sacrifice pleasures which are transitory, which I can guide my existence without them, and therefore promoting myself. Which kind of time can I sacrifice? Because sacrifice time and even their material interests. Can I sacrifice my time of laziness in order to study more, in order to fortify my reasoning in relation to what it is to be a medium, what it is relating to my mediumship, what it is to develop my own qualities as a medium, because I'm here exactly to do that, to promote myself, to diminish my imperfections and increase my qualities for the good of others. How much time do I have in my existence in devoting myself to the good for all, in devoting myself towards helping humanity? We saw previously in the imperfect mediums, some groups talk about selfishness, indifference, proud, and so on and so forth. It's fundamental when we can nourish ourselves through these teachings, because they really refer not that much in terms of mediums, but the values that we carry within our psychic. And the medium's book is the greatest book that is available for everyone on earth and even beyond, for those who want to develop their and understand their own psychic. We are here to sacrifice. Translating means letting go what is futile, what is not useful, for us to become real, serious, devoted mediums for the enlightened spirits to act, to communicate through us in helping us and humanity, promoting us towards a better lifestyle with less imperfections, with more qualities, which is expressing the goodness within ourselves, which is manifesting the real self. And moving forward, still within the mediums book, and another group of good mediums, we have the trustworthy mediums. And I quote, "Those who, besides the ease with which they receive communications, merit great confidence due to their own character and the elevated nature of the spirits who assist them. They are less likely to be deceived. Later, we shall see that this trustfulness has nothing to do with the respectability of the names taken by spirits. Trustworthy, we need to be faithful. We need to develop our persistence. We need to show work in the field of goodness, because the superior spirits cannot trust us. If we do one little action of goodness today, tomorrow we are indifferent, as we mentioned in the previous groups. We are full of pride, we don't care, we don't want to do anything. In that way, we are not suitable to establish the affinity with those who want us to sacrifice our personal interests in order to favor the goodness, expressing goodness, favoring goodness, cooperating for the goodness of all of humanity. Surely we are not here to change and help all the humanity on earth. It's impossible for all of us. But where we are, in the field, in our families, in our communities, in the buildings, we all have neighbors, in where we are, not only in the spiritual societies, because the Spiritism, as mentioned previously, is not only for the Spiritist community, is the teachings of the enlightened spirits offered openly to every spirit on earth and beyond. So that is quite important for us to understand. Now, when we refer to trustful mediums, we move in the mediums book, chapter 16, item 198. And who is now teaching us? Socrates, the greatest philosopher from old times, is through the mediums book teaching us, and I quote, "When the principle or seed of a faculty exists, it always expresses itself through unmistakable signs. If they would limit themselves to their own speciality, mediums could perfect it and obtain grand and beautiful results. However, if they concern themselves with everything, they will not get any good results. It should be noted that the desire to indefinitely extend the ambit of one's faculties is pretentious pride, which the spirits never leave unpunished. Good spirits always abandon the presumptuous, who then become the target of deceiving ones. Humbleness, charity, goodness is what attracts the good spirits. So it's up to us if we prefer to attract the imperfect spirits, as we went through these reflections here, or the good ones. And Socrates carries on by saying, unfortunately, it is not uncommon to see mediums who are not content with the faculties they have received and who, out of vanity or ambition, aspire to possess exceptional ones that they believe they make them famous. Such pretense takes away their most precious quality, being regarded as trustworthy mediums. Bear in mind, is Socrates teaching to all of us? Is very profound, very clear, very straightforward what he is letting us to know here. So we repeat again, in order to be trusted by the enlightened spirits, I need to show really my dedication, my inner decision, be compromised in overcoming my shortcomings through my own transformation, through my self-enlightenment process, and dedicating myself also to others. No longer stay in the selfish way. It's me, 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 me. This is a way to be an imperfect medium. So the reflections are here. Of course, it depends on all of us. And as we move on, item 197 is still within the good mediums. Now is the spirit, the benefactor Erastus, teaching us, and I quote, "It is undeniable, and you must be well understand, that by exposing the qualities and defects of mediums in this way, you will provoke annoyance and even animosity on the part of some. But what does it matter? Mediumship is expanding more and more, and mediums who were to take these remarks badly would only show that they are not good mediums, which means that they are actually assisted by less evolved spirits." It is important to listen what Erastus is teaching us, which is true. Moreover, as I have already said, all these should quickly pass, and bad mediums who abuse their abilities or put them to bad use will suffer sad consequences, as has already been the case with some. They will learn at their own cost the consequences for turning a gift that God has given them for their own moral progress into satisfying their earthly passions. If you cannot lead them back on the moral path, pity them, for you may say that God has reproved them. So we are here to help each other, but we cannot impose anything, because this is not what the Spiritism teaches us. As we started our reflections today by saying that Spiritism exposes. He doesn't impose anything, but it's up to us to develop the inner power to overcome our passions, to dedicate ourselves more towards goodness, to develop ourselves more in terms of our qualities, the higher qualities of the self, the sacred, the divine within us, and therefore be more willing to sacrifice what is temporal and dedicate ourselves more in exercising, in training ourselves towards what is real, even when our experience on earth ends as a natural way through physical death, but we carry on. Let's enjoy these reflections and let's think about in a deep way. As we are coming towards the end, is still Socrates here also helping us by saying this table is of great importance, not only for the sincere mediums who, in reading it, will seek the good faith to save themselves from the stumbling blocks to which they may be exposed, but also for all of those who make use of mediums, because it will provide them with a measure of what they can reasonably expect. So it is important, not only for the mediums, but in case we seek out for mediums, which kind of character does that medium have? Because I will be tuning in through affinity, as mentioned at the beginning, with the same levels. Socrates is still who is enlightening us here. And as we're coming to the end today, nothing more, nothing less, we will end our reflections with reflection which is in the Mediums book, in the Seara dos Médiuns, which is a book in Portuguese. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, is not yet translated into English, in the chapter Inspiration, and we translated it for us here. When Chico Xavier, who was the medium, where the Spirit Emmanuel, his benefactor, teaches us, and I quote, "Let us seek inspiration for the work of good that belongs to us, aware that the mediumistic wonders, without activity in the good for all, may be admirable motives to precious conversations between the pompous of the world, but deep down, they are always the exclusivism of someone, of no use to anyone." So, as we come to the end with the thought of the Spirit Emmanuel, which is again helping us to empower ourselves, it's very important to seek the inspiration of all the spiritual guides. We all have them, good spirits who are more evolved than us, but also at the same time to open up that we put our mediumship towards the work for the good of all, that we expand the goodness within and become instrument of goodness, either in our families, in our workplaces, in our communities, and in case we work in a spiritual center too. But we are promoting ourselves on a daily basis. And as mentioned previously, the imperfect mediums means the imperfections that we as a spirit, therefore as mediums, bring, and we are invited to overcome them. This is the invitation that we leave here through our reflections today, and we all are capable in case we choose so. We need to develop our free will, stimulate us, and be better than we were today, tomorrow, and so on. Every day, every moment, trying to think what we are thinking, what we are feeling, what we are intending to say and do, and promote whatever is not good, but it doesn't carry good qualities. In that way, we are promoting our psychological, emotional dimension. We are becoming healthier. We are having a sense of well-being. We are feeling more encouraged. We are feeling more stimulated as we engaged through the values, the real values of life, and are promoting and evolving with the permission of doing mistakes as learners as we are, as long as we are no longer validating the mistakes and the shortcomings, but only learning from them. And in that way, I wish you much peace to all, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.